Canceled today's planned signing ceremony on Capitol Hill for a bipartisan affordable housing bill. On Truth Social this morning, President Trump announced the housing news conference and bill signing was canceled. That is until Congress passes the Save America Act, his proof of citizenship voting bill that doesn't have enough support to pass. In his post, he said he considers the matter a national emergency. The housing bill was approved by both the House and Senate earlier this week. Its aim, encourage developers to build more homes, limits local government's ability to reform zoning laws and lift permit restrictions. It also limits large investors' ability to buy up single-family homes. Now, if it becomes law, it could change everything for families trying to buy a home in Siouxland. But will it actually work here? We looked at the numbers and talked to local builders to find out. Now, the Northwest Iowa Realtors Association says the median sale price for a home in Woodbury County is $220,000. That's of April this year. The U.S. Census says the median household income for Woodbury County is $73,658. Realtors say a home price should be no more than 3 to 5 times the annual salary, and these medians fit that rule of thumb. KTV's Taylor Deckard spoke with local experts about what the housing bill could mean when it comes to building costs. She joined us in the studio tonight. Taylor?
Yes, Jessica. The bill targets a critical shortage. America doesn't have enough homes for people who want to buy them. Experts say if the president signs this bill, it would help as a stepping stone to growing Sioux City. Lieber Construction is making progress on land on the north side of Sioux City for 158 homes. Right now, they're carving out the lots using manual labor and machines before moving on to the next step in construction. CEO Dustin Lieber says there is a housing shortage in Siouxland, and as more new homes are built, other people can make moves into the older homes, creating multiple opportunities for different levels of affordability. He calls the homes they're working on workforce housing priced up to $300,000. Lieber said one way new homes would be more affordable has to do with the cost of the product.
If there could be things that we could do to reduce the cost of lumber, to reduce the cost of steel, to reduce the cost of transportation, so that the supplies that are utilized to build the projects, the houses, the buildings are reduced. And then things are going to happen. You know, Sioux City's been the same population since like the 50s. Something needs to be done to change that.
Lieber hopes in the next 2 to 3 years, more houses will become available for individuals and families. If the president signs the bill, Lieber believes Sioux City could finally break a 70-year pattern of stagnation. But it's just one piece of the puzzle. Local builders say more needs to happen to make housing truly affordable here, and the bill would be the first step. Jessica?
Taylor, thanks. Senator Pete Ricketts of Nebraska had this to say when the bipartisan bill passed the Senate. Quote, the 21st Century Road to Housing Act is an important step to make housing more affordable for Nebraskans. Cutting through bureaucratic red tape and improving efficiency will increase housing stock. More homes will make housing more affordable. I'm glad to see this historic legislation pass in the Senate. I will continue to work to drive down the cost of living for Nebraskans. Today, we asked him what he thought about President Trump canceling the signing of that bill.
I respect the president, and it's certainly his prerogative to, make that choice. I would advise the president to take the win. This housing bill will help reduce housing costs.
Once the U.S. House submits a bill to the president, he has 10 days to sign the bill. If the president does not sign the bill and Congress is still in session, it becomes law. Now, on the topic of housing, the Siouxland Coalition to End Homelessness is hosting a resource fair tomorrow from 1 until 4 p.m. It will be held in the Siouxland Community Health Center's lower parking lot. That's at 10th and Pierce Streets in Sioux City. There are expected to be organizations there that can help those in need with food, housing assistance, and those medical needs. This is in coordination with the mobile showers the health center hosts each Monday and Thursday afternoon.